My name is Willy Krause, which, as you can hear, is not a Derry name. I grew up in East Germany, in fact, close to the city of Leipzig, and this is where I spent the first 18, 19 years of my life. And one of the most prominent features of growing up in Leipzig, if you compare it to here and my life here, is that faith did not play a major part in the society there. So I went to a secular school. In fact, there were no religious schools around. I wasn't baptized as a child. My parents are not baptized. My parents don't practice any religion. And this was normal for me for the first 18, 19 years of my life. This is all I knew. In fact, I only knew a couple of people who were baptized and probably only one person who actively practiced their religion. And for me, that was fine, that was normal. I did not question that. And to be honest, I thought that religion was an outdated concept for people who need something to hold on to in their life, who maybe didn't make sense of their lives in any other way. It, to be honest, it was a naive view, and I never really looked into it for the first part of my life, which then changed, obviously, when I was 18 years old. I went to university when I was 17, turning 18, and I moved to Berlin, which obviously is the capital of Germany. It is a huge city, almost 4 million people, and I really wanted to move there uh, out of the kind of provincial atmosphere that I grew up in. I thought Berlin would be great for me. A lot of culture, a lot of art, things that I enjoy. I could do whatever I wanted. I was comfortable living there. I had my own very small flat, but I had my own, and it was a wonderfully free experience, I thought. However, after a few months, I discovered that I am so free, I don't know what to do with myself. And although it was fine, I had my studies, I was studying history, and that was going okay, and I had everything I wanted, I felt that something was missing. And I couldn't name this something that was missing or this someone that was missing, but I started to investigate. I had always been interested in philosophy and human thoughts, so I looked into that and I read through all the great thinkers from Socrates to Sartre, and I was disappointed. There were many interesting approaches, but none of them really struck me as the one that I wanted to pursue. Especially disheartening was then the answer that philosophers like Sartre gave, that there was no exterior meaning to my life whatsoever, and to lead your life was just to get to terms with that and to accept that, which was really disappointing for me. And I did not want to accept that. I didn't know what to do about it, but it was sure for me that there was something more that was just waiting for me. I looked into science as well, and I thought maybe science can give me the answers that I was looking for. But I discovered that while science can describe the world how it is, it cannot really answer the question as to why it is the way it is and what the meaning is that I could take from it. So this was my state of mind into staying in Berlin for about 5, 6 months, and then something happened that changed my life forever, I have to say. In February and March 2016, I visited a school friend of mine in Tanzania. She was working there as a volunteer in a school, and I was mad enough to travel there and to stay with her high up in the mountains in a village in Tanzania for 4 weeks. And towards the end of my stay, we did what every tourist in East Africa does. We went on safari to look at lions and giraffes and elephants and things like this. And when you do this, you're on a jeep and you're just driving through the wilderness. And there was one moment when I was standing on that jeep and I was looking out, and I saw the beauty of nature. I saw clouds and I saw trees and the sun shining through all of this. And it's something very hard to describe probably for anyone else, but in this particular moment, I was sure that this is so beautiful that there has to be something more to it. This can't just be random or coincidental, just an assembly of atoms that will just disassemble in a few thousand years and then be gone forever. No, I was sure at this moment that this was made by someone to be enjoyed by someone else, by me and by others. And at this moment, for the first time, I thought that this someone might be who other people call God. And this was a shocking thought, and a thought that gripped me and that never left me. And when I came back from Tanzania, the first thing I did was to try to find out about this. Who is this God, or what is it actually that other people think about God when they think about God? And I started reading. I randomly read books by Pope Benedict, for example, or by St. Augustine. And I quickly discovered that my naive notion of what religion and faith is about was completely wrong. It wasn't about superstition. It was actually about a way of life and a perspective that grounds yourself in something that is greater than just the one person, but which is God and which is love in the end. And I remember distinctly reading the autobiography of St. Augustine, his Confessions. And in this, he describes his own way from his pagan upbringing in Africa until his career in Rome, and this moment when everything changed for him when he met God. And I thought, well, there is this man 1600 years ago in a totally different environment, but he had those same questions that I knew from my own life, and he found the same answer that I was attracted to. So if he could do it 1600 years ago, then I could do it now as well. So I started reading the Bible, for example, just randomly flicking through the pages with the very naive attempt to start reading it from the first page to the last. And I think somewhere in the book of Leviticus, I just stopped because it didn't make any sense for me. So I knew that I had to get help. And after a few weeks or months of reading, I had got this understanding that Christianity is not just about me sitting in my little flat reading all these books and having all these fancy ideas. It's about community and the encounter with others. So I thought, well, let's talk to a priest. The thing was, I had never talked to a priest. I don't think I'd ever seen a priest in my life. So I had no idea what to do. So I sat in front of my computer and Googled, where is the next parish in Berlin? And as I found out, it was just across the street. I had been looking at it every day when I was waiting for the train, and I never knew that it was a parish. So I wrote to that priest, who was probably surprised as well by this young man who approached him and wanted to know about God. But he helped me. I was terrified the first time I went to see him because I had all kinds of ideas of things that could happen and how I could embarrass myself through my naivety and ignorance. But he was very kind to me, and he helped me and he supported me and explained a lot to me. And at some point, the decision was made within myself that I wanted to be part of this. I wanted to be a Christian. And at this time, I went to Mass for the first time. This priest had invited me, and I sat there at the very back. Obviously, I didn't want to be seen by anyone. I sat there at the very back, and halfway through it struck me that if this is actually true, what they believe and what they say, that what is happening there is actually God coming to us, physically meeting us. If this is true, then this changes everything. Then this is the center of our whole existence, because this is God coming to us. And this changed everything for me. I really wanted to become a Christian after that, and I decided to get baptized after that. If you are baptized as an adult, it doesn't just happen as it does for infants or children. So I had to prepare to become baptized, and there was a course given by Jesuit priests in Berlin for adults from all over the Archdiocese of Berlin who would come there for 2 hours every 2 weeks on a Wednesday evening to talk about God, to read the scriptures, and to pray together. And we even went on retreat to a Benedictine monastery together to get an idea of what Catholicism is about on the intellectual level and on the spiritual and human level as well. So this course took 6 or 7 months, and it was extremely interesting for me to see, and probably the best part about it, that there were so many different people coming together from so many different ways of life and with different motivations why they wanted to become Christians or Catholics in particular. There was a mother and a father who had just had their first child born and who wanted their child to grow up with Catholicism. There were people who had just lost a spouse, for example, and through this grieving process had found God in their life. So it was amazing to see how God works in the life of different kinds of people in unique ways. And it was a great encouragement for me to do that. And obviously, when this course was done, I had the choice, did I want to be baptized or not? And I wholeheartedly agreed. And then in this parish in Berlin, with the priest that I had first visited, he was the one who baptized me on the 16th of April 2017, which was Easter morning. I remember it was 5 o'clock on the Sunday morning. I had stayed up all night and I couldn't get to sleep, obviously not. And it was one of the greatest days of my life. And it was the first time that I had experienced the Easter liturgies as well. And this was extremely impressive for me. And still, Easter, for that reason, is the most beautiful time of the year, those 3 days for me. And since then, I was a Catholic. When I was told that I needed a godparent, I thought this was optional because, well, I can understand why children need a godparent, but I was told that this is actually obligatory for everyone to. So I had a problem because I had not known any Catholics for longer than a few months at this point. Obviously, I was active in that parish in Berlin, but I didn't know them that well. The only other Catholic that I knew was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine from school, who had moved with her parents when she was younger from a Catholic region in West Germany to Leipzig. So that's why she was a Catholic. And she is a month older than I am, and we were good friends in school. And so I asked her if she would be my godmother. I didn't even know if that was possible. I had to check. I mean, because this is not the normal godparent, godson relationship here. But now I have a godmother who is a month older than I am, and we are still very good friends. And I'm glad that I picked her, and she was there. And she was also my sponsor for my confirmation, which obviously happened in the very same night. So I received the sacrament of baptism, of confirmation, and my first Holy Communion in that very same ceremony that Easter morning in 2017. At this point after my baptism, and even before, I was convinced, and I felt it deep inside me, that this was obviously a life-changing event for me. I couldn't just go on as I had done before. Something had to change. I mean, there was this spiritual change in my life, but this obviously had repercussions for my whole life. I wanted to change the way I lived my life. I wanted to do something different. So I decided that I wanted to be part of a Catholic community somewhere. Well, I had grown up obviously in East Germany without any experience of faith community, And even in Berlin, there were maybe 4% Catholics. So even there was not a big Catholic community. So I wanted to go and live somewhere and to be part of a community. And furthermore, I wanted to share my faith. I mean, I had this great joy about my baptism, this great fruit of the Holy Spirit that was just abundant at this point. And I wanted to share this with others because I believe in the importance of personal witness and testimony to others. And so that this joy that I felt could be part of somebody else's life as well. And there's this great line in the first letter of St. John when he says, I write this to you so that your joy may be complete and my joy may be complete. So this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to share this so that others could have the same experience. Well, now how would I do this practically? I approached that rationally. I said, well, you want to share your faith and you want to do it with young people. I had always had an affinity for working with young people, and I had had some experience with that prior to it. So I thought, work with young people in the church. And then the second thought was, you always wanted to go abroad to get a new perspective, a new experience, and to practice language skills and things like this. So you go abroad and you work with young people in the church. Well, this was April, May. So any programs that would start at the beginning of the next academic year, maybe in August, September, were fast approaching. So I thought, you can't go that far away. It's too late to go to America or to the Philippines or wherever you want to go. So it had to be Europe. It had to be English speaking because this was my best foreign language. And it had to be Catholic. So English speaking Catholic in Europe. So that was Ireland. So I sat again in front of my computer and I asked Google, show me youth ministry initiatives in the Catholic Church in Ireland. And up came what was called the Derry Youth Community. There was a website there. First of all, I had to Google the city of Derry because I had never heard of it. And this sounded good. I watched the promotion video and I saw Bishop Donal walking up and down the cathedral grounds, and my first instinct was, well, they sound funny over there, and it was hard for me to understand it, but I thought this could be something for me. So I wrote an email to the coordinator of that community saying, here I am, would you take me, and would you take me already in August? I had no hopes or expectations for this. I just sent it out, not really thinking about it. So I was surprised when about 2 or 3 weeks later, there was a reply saying, yes, we would very much like you to come. We will have an interview with you next week via Skype, and you can tell us about yourself. We find your story interesting, and I think you would be a great help for us. So I had an interview via Skype, and Emmett Thompson, who did the interview, who is a true Derry born and raised man and who has a quite strong Derry accent. It was a great challenge for me to understand him, but I think we made it work. And after this interview, he said, well, if you want to come, we would very much like to have you here. And that was my decision made. I thought, well, you go for a year, which was about 10 months, really, from the beginning of September until June, and that was it. My parents weren't too happy that I took a break from my studies, because this is what I thought it was, a break. I would come back to it and continue my normal life as I had led it before. And this is how I found out about Derry. And a few weeks later, yes, it was on the 27th of August 2017, I flew from Berlin to Belfast and then took the bus to Derry, and here I was. My very first impression was standing at the bus stop, and Father Patrick Lagan was sent to pick me up, and I had texted him my details and when I would arrive, and this was the only contact information I had was an email address, really. So the bus arrived, I got out, I had all my luggage, and I was standing there. Everybody else had left, so I was standing there alone, and Father Patrick didn't come. So I was getting a bit restless because I thought, well, I have nowhere to go. I don't have an address. I don't have a telephone number. I don't have anything. I have a professional email address that nobody will answer on a Sunday afternoon. So what do I do if he doesn't show up? About 10 minutes later, he did come, and those 15 minutes felt like 3 hours. But he did come, and he apologized, obviously, and he had something else to do. But he welcomed me to Derry, and I got to know Derry in the next week, and I was introduced to all kinds of people, which basically involved a lot of tea and a lot of biscuits and a lot of shaking hands, and people were extremely friendly, very welcoming. I got used to the dialect and accent as well, and it was really, from the beginning, I felt like a part of a community, and I very much enjoyed my work, and I very much enjoyed living in a community, which was the Derry Youth Community. The Derry Youth Community was set up, I think, in 2013 in the Diocese of Derry to support the youth ministry around the diocese, to support the catechetical centre, and especially the work in the Templemore parish, which is St Eugene's Cathedral and the Long Tower. And that's where we are based, and we lived in Pump Street at the centre of Derry in a beautiful house, which was an old convent and an old school before that. But this great house was given to us, and in my time, in the beginning, we were 3 people. So there was Hannah Best, a girl from Ireland, from Dublin, actually. And then there was Sebastiano Pellizzari from Italy, who was a seminarian from Italy. And then there was me. So we 3 formed the community in my first year. And as you can imagine, you have a girl from Ireland, a boy from Italy, and a boy from Germany. There are 3 different cultures, 3 different ways of living, 3 different just ways of cooking, for example, coming together. And this was one of the great adventures, to make this work, to figure out what is the other like, what am I like in this community, what compromises do I have to make, how do I myself change through all of this. This was a great experience. So the community aspect was one of the 3 pillars, I would say, that formed the Derry Youth Community. The first was community. The second one, I would say, is prayer. So we did morning, evening, and night prayer together every single day. We went to Mass together every single day. We prayed for each other and with the young people. And we had time of adoration and reflection every day. And the whole community was centered around prayer, around this encounter with Jesus, so that we could bring him to others as well. Only if you know Jesus, you can bring him to others and draw other people closer to him. The third pillar of what this community was about mainly consisted in working with young people. So we had sacramental talks for students preparing for their first Holy Communion and for confirmation, which is basically working on primary level. Then we had secondary school retreats as well that we facilitated, and we went into the schools and facilitated faith enrichment, RE programs, for example, that helped young people to encounter Jesus on a personal level. This and many other things we did with young people. In the parish here as well, we also worked with all age groups in facilitating the Alpha program, for example, or running prayer groups and other meetings, so that we could share our experience with young people, with all age groups, and draw everybody closer to Jesus. This is what we did, and I learned so much from the people with whom I worked. I learned so much about the work that I was doing. I learned so much about my faith. I learned so much about myself and my own strengths and weaknesses. And another aspect that brought this to the front was the change that happened in the second year of the community. So Hannah Best left, and we were only the 2 of us for a few months until a girl from Italy arrived, Michaela, who lived with us. So there was obviously a change of dynamics in the community and a change of the relationships in the community, which obviously forced all of us to reassess our relationship, to readjust, and to grow into this new situation. And this is something I found very instructive, because there's change in our lives all the time. This situation at the moment is totally new, and we have to adjust. And learning to adjust to cope with different situations is something that I found very helpful and useful. And this is something that I learned about myself, how to do this, how to stay true to who I am, but how to compromise and to find myself in new situations. Already shortly after my arrival here in Derry, I developed a great sense of belonging to this place and to these people in particular. The people of Derry whom I met in the church, in the schools, through my work, or just in the street, they were so warm and welcoming. There was something about them that made me feel at home here, almost instantly when coming here. So after over a year here, it was obvious to me that my initial plan, just to go to Derry and then to go back to Germany and to study and lead my normal life as I had planned it all those years ago, that this would not happen. This is not what I want to do. This is not what God wants me to do. So I had to ask the question, what is it that God wants me to do? And since the very beginning, and I have already described this when explaining my motivation for coming to Derry, I had this urge to share my faith with others and to bring Jesus to others, and the joy that I get from my faith and the fulfillment that I find in my relationship with Jesus, to bring that to others. In this context, and especially through the help of Sebastiano, with whom I was living, who was a seminarian, who had spent years in a seminary since he was 12 years old, which showed me that, well, seminarians and priests are normal people as well. You can have fun with them, you can argue with them, you can have a difference of opinion with them. This was something that helped me, through the personal example, to find my way to making the decision, well, maybe God is calling me to be a priest as well. We had great examples of priests here in Derry, Father Paul Farron in the cathedral, Father Aidan Bullen, Father Patrick Lagan, the bishop as well. So many priests that showed me that this way of life is fulfilling, and it's not about sacrifices that you make, but it's about the calling that you have to be of service to others. And this is what I wanted to do. And I started to discern this and to try to find out if this is what God wanted me to do also. So I started a discernment process officially with the Diocese of Derry in February after coming here, after having been here for half a year. I first approached the vocations director at this time and told him about this feeling that I had, and he was very supportive. And since then, we were in regular contact and talked about this, what was going on in me. And after about a year of discernment and reflection upon it, I decided to just go for it. This is what I was called to do at this moment, even if it's not what I will ultimately do in my life. This is something that I feel called to do right now. So I started an application process for the Diocese of Derry, which was quite difficult, and there was a lot of paperwork involved, and I had to get references and personality references from all kinds of people. Back in Germany, for example, I wrote to one of my teachers from school who very kindly wrote a reference for me. I contacted the priest who baptized me in Berlin, who wrote a reference for me. And thank God the bishop here speaks German, so I didn't have to translate all of them myself. But this was all part of this discernment process and this application process, which culminated in an interview that I had here in this very room, actually, about a year ago, with the bishop and the vocations panel, when I had to explain myself. And after that, after also a process of psychological assessment to make sure that I was mentally and also physically up for this challenge, I was accepted for the Diocese of Derry as a seminarian. And I remember that moment. I was back in Germany for my holidays, and I got an email from the Vicar General, Father Paul McCafferty, who was just telling me, yes, the bishop has accepted your application. And I remember I couldn't stop smiling for the rest of the day. And I met a friend who just looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you today?" And I just told her this was one of the greatest days of my life. Obviously, after the day of my baptism, this was the second step that I was taking on my faith journey. And since then, I then begun my discernment, my official training for the priesthood in Maynooth, at the National Seminary in Maynooth. That was last September, at the beginning of last September. I went down to Maynooth and started my studies of philosophy there and my discernment, which is obviously another chapter, another great adventure in this, my story.